Hey, it's Pastor Quincy from Cuyahoga Falls Church of the Nazarene here to talk to you about episode 4 of season 3 of The Chosen. Chosen is a free TV series about the life of Jesus. Wonderful way to help the scriptures come alive. Now, this episode doesn't have quite as much historical and scriptural background as some of the other episodes, so my video study guide will be a little shorter here, but there's a lot of good character development and plot advancement that goes on in the story. So it begins with this amazing montage of the disciples going out as Jesus commanded in Matthew chapter 10 and doing what he asked them to do, healing people, proclaiming the gospel, and casting out demons. They're doing all that. Love how this is acted, love how this is presented. You can see how the disciples themselves are shocked by what's unfolding before them. You can see some resistance coming up against them, but you can see at the end them leading new followers of Jesus in praying the Lord's Prayer. Then the disciples return to Capernaum. We see James and John in synagogue with their dad as they listen to Leviticus 13 read. I've often joked that Leviticus 13 is the hardest passage to preach because it's about regulations on mildew and skin disease. I've brought it as a passage when Sunday falls on April 1st to see who falls along with that. And so here the James and John are paying attention for once in their lives, and Zebedee says something is up. And I love how he says that. He sees that his children, his sons, have changed and have become a little more serious about their faith. And we see that there's a broken cistern going on here. The sewage has gotten into the well, and they need purification water for everything that they do. The women need purification water for those who have their time of the month. It's important to every part of what the Jewish people believe. And so Yusuf, one of the rabbis at the synagogue, is going to use his family's connections, his considerable wealth, to make sure the Romans have the supplies that they need to repair the well. Now, we see that Rabbi Shammai in the Sanhedrin wants a report about Jesus. He wants anyone who confesses him as the Messiah, who believes in his prophecies and his teachings, to be brought before the Sanhedrin. And so we see this resistance rising against Jesus, and then we see Yusuf finding an ally in Jairus. Jairus has read Yusuf's account of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and then he's compared it to the scriptures. Like a good Berean in the scripture, he has looked at the scriptures and said, you know what, the Messiah doesn't. It's not said that the Messiah has to be a military Messiah. He's the one who sets the Lord's captives free. He's the one who makes things right with the people, and he hears that in the message of Jesus. So it's great to see Jairus developing that. Then Peter returns, and of course there's some great little moments here as he reconnects with his wife, but then immediately we notice that there's some tension going on, and Eden gives Peter those dreaded words, "It's fine," as Peter goes to look for a nap, not understanding that he's missing some pretty big signals from his wife that he needs to inquire a little further, look a little further at what has happened to her while he's been gone. And we'll learn more about that later. Peter's wife, Eden, goes out and she runs into somebody who helps her find a different place to be able to go and wash her clothes. And then we go and see that Jairus' daughter is now sick. His daughter, Nili, is sick. She falls to the ground, and something is going to have to be done here. That, of course, falls a lot along with what we know in Mark chapter 5, that Jairus' daughter is going to be sick to the point of death, and Jesus is going to be the one to confront that problem. We discover that Eden has connected with Veronica. Now, Veronica is not in Scripture by name, but tradition says that she is the one that Jesus healed of the issue of blood, and that someday she will help wipe his face on the way to the cross from blood, and then it becomes something the church treasures as this cloth that has the impression of Jesus's face on it. Don't know how far the show will go into that, but they have at least brought up this name Veronica, which isn't in Scripture, but it's a tradition, and I'm fine with them incorporating that as part of what they're telling in the story. They don't have another name for this woman, so giving her this name that's associated with tradition makes sense for me. We see a lot of the inner thoughts and workings of women disciples in this passage, from Eden and eventually Veronica to Mary Magdalene and Tamar, who are going through their own conflicts of what they bring to the table, their pasts and all that involves, and how they can work together and how Jesus can use their pasts. As they talk about multiplying Joanna's gifts, as they talk about working with Zebedee, I'm reminded of Jesus' parable about the talents in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. He wants his disciples to be industrious about the work of the kingdom, and that's what we see here. The disciples are back. They're having a debriefing meeting, And they're discussing a lot of things that went on. They got power but no understanding, they say. We healed but we felt overwhelmed. We spoke words that we didn't necessarily believe and live by yet. And that's where we a lot of times are as Christians. We believe before it's reality in our lives, and we act in faith and trust that Jesus is going to teach our hearts and our minds to go along with what it is we believe. Zebedee's actions are now matching his beliefs as he sells his boat to embrace this olive oil project. And we discover more about Veronica, that she's been bleeding for 12 years and no doctors can help her. She's everything, unclean, everything. And yet she's still called and wanted to be loved by Jesus. Eden doesn't share that with her yet, and it's partially because of the pain that Eden is experiencing as she follows Jesus. And that's an interesting conflict to continue to follow in this episode. Jairus tells Yusuf about his daughter who might be ill from the water problems and wonders if he's being punished by God for believing in the Nazarene, but he can't stop because he believes that it's true in Scripture. And they receive this message of looking for Jesus and decide they're going to try to cover up what happened with Jesus and the words that he said. They're just going to try to divert attention from that. And this report from the Sanhedrin reminds us of John chapter 9, verse 22, John chapter 7, verse 13, and John chapter 12, verse 42, where we see these indications that the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of Jerusalem did have word out that Jesus was not to be somebody that the people follow, and there would be consequences if you did. So Simon's upset about Eden. He doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't understand why she's upset. Jesus returns to the house, and it's one too many things for Simon, and he has to leave. And then he ends up talking to Gaius, and this friendship between Gaius and Peter develops, and they're talking about the connections they have to being seafaring people and from a seafaring family. And Gaius finally gives him the advice to say, "You are right, I'm sorry," to his wife, which honestly is great advice. So we'll see how this develops in Gaius' life and Peter's life as these episodes and seasons continue. And then finally in the episode, we have the news that Jairus' daughter has gotten much sicker, and we wonder what will happen and how that problem will be confronted. If you want to look ahead, go to Mark chapter 5, but otherwise, keep watching.